The results are in, and now the race to become France's new president is down to 2. In the lead with 23.8% is Emmanuel Macron, a 39-year-old former banker and independent centrist who's never run for office.
Je souhaite, dans 15 jours, devenir votre président. Le président de tout le peuple de France. Le président des patriotes face à la menace des nationalistes.
With 21.5%, Marine Le Pen won a record number of votes for her right-wing party, Front National.
Les Français doivent saisir cette opportunité historique qui s'ouvre, car le grand enjeu de cette élection est la mondialisation sauvage qui met en danger notre civilisation.
It's a seismic shift in French politics. For the first time in decades, both main political parties crashed out of the first round. Contest is now between France's political outsiders, who will face off in a final vote on May 7th. The race ahead is all about tactical voting. Macron and Le Pen need to poach votes from other candidates to get a majority. Fillon, a conservative, has formally endorsed Macron to block Le Pen. His voters could follow suit. Meanwhile, Mélenchon, a leftist, has yet to endorse either candidate, but many of his voters are Eurosceptics and might choose to vote against Macron. Hamon, the socialist leader, has also endorsed Macron, making him, statistically, the frontrunner. But for many French people, the choice is far from clear. Both candidates offer extremely different directions for the country. Both promise a departure from the politics of old. The race to the Élysée will be tough, and it could get ugly. Sandra Gatman, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined now by Rokhaya Diallo from Paris. She's a journalist and gender and racial equality activist. And from Coventry, David Lees. He's a professor at the University of Warwick, specializing in French politics. Thanks, both of you, for joining us. Rokhaya, I was going to ask you a different opening question, but just before I sat down, my floor manager here told me his French roommate in Istanbul, who is a socialist, voted for Le Pen. Now, it once again proved to me that I don't understand French politics. Is that the type of psychological motivation at play amongst millions of French that led us to Le Pen versus Macron in the final round?
I'm not sure to understand the motivations of your former roommate, but I have the feeling that Marine Le Pen has succeeded in normalizing her party. Actually, it was seen when Jean-Marie Le Pen, her father, went to the second round in 2002. The Front National was seen as a very racist party, and according to me, it still is. But she succeeded in, just cleaning the image of the party and making people believe that she's not racist, that the party is not racist anymore. But most of the people know that the party has its roots in the far right, and still have in the members of the party and in the people who are at the head of the party. Some people who still defend ideas that are against many minorities in France. So I think that most of the voters of the Front National are not from the Socialist Party, but mostly are the people who used to support the Communist Party, or, so there are mostly people from the working class who used to support the far left.
Right. And let's look into that, because you brought it up, the difference between her and her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen. Now, he was made famous in many ways by his anti-Semitic comments. Many say that she sort of supplanted that with Islamophobia and comments against Muslims. He had pro-Nazi occupation comments. She's had anti-Nazi comments, but she's also had other controversial World War II comments. And of course, he was the founder of the National Front. She ejected her father from the party in 2015 because of a lot of his comments. So I guess, let me ask you, has she evolved enough to distinguish herself from his racist past, enough for many voters maybe who voted for other politicians in the first round to give her a chance in the second round? Has she created enough of a distance and enough evolution from his past?
I think that there are two things. The first thing is that there has been a shift on the whole political landscape, meaning that most of the parties who used to combat the ideas of the National Front has embraced many of them. So the Islamophobia in France doesn't only come from the Front National, but also from many parties, including the Socialist Party. So that means that the Front National has been able to really make what used to be their ideas to make them mainstream. And in this way, Marine Le Pen doesn't seem that strange in the French political landscape. And she has been able to clean her image up. So I don't think that there is much of a difference between the Front National of today and the former Front National, but she's been able to clean the image of the party and to make the ideas that were very specific to the Front National being the ideas that are shared now in many, many parties.
Okay, David Lee, so 21.4% of voters, did they vote for a Front National that's still quite racist, just has better PR?
Yes, I think so. I'd say so, absolutely. I think that it's very clear that the Front National is better managed in terms of its image, but I completely agree, actually. The Front National today is in many ways no different from what it was when Jean-Marie Le Pen founded it in 1972. And I completely agree with this idea of these ideas becoming more mainstream, actually. And in particular, the centre-right has stolen a lot of these issues around immigration, around law and order, and has really sought to try and play on those fears with voters. As to whether Le Pen's done enough to convince everyone else to back her in the second round, I think that remains to be seen, but she does have, nevertheless, some chance of gaining votes, as the other contributor said, from the extreme left, from former voters of Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
Yeah, and David, so it seems as if Macron has a lot of momentum behind him, a lot of support behind him. The Economist has called it for him. They said, let me quote them, as our election forecast has made clear, these dispiriting runoff results have spelled doom for Ms. Le Pen. Before the election, we chanced her at 1%. That projection holds doubly since she has drawn Mr. Macron as her runoff opponent. One would think, given the past year with Brexit and Trump and so on, there'd be cause for a little bit of humility and people being a bit circumspect. Not so The Economist. Do you agree with that, David?
I think The Economist is being rather optimistic, perhaps there, rather complacent in some ways. I wouldn't say that Le Pen is going to win. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case, but I do think she will do much better in the second round than people are currently predicting. And I do think that has a lot to do with the issues around immigration and law and order, but it also has a lot to do with her stealing votes, as I say, from other candidates, from the extreme left in particular, but also from the centre-right, from former François Fillon voters. And I would say it's going to be a lot closer than people may actually believe. However, Macron does seem to be in the right place at the right time, and he does appeal to those people who are a bit more moderate and perhaps a bit less extreme in their views.
Yeah, and Ruqayya, the left did terribly. I mean, Mélenchon did okay, 19.6%. If we look at the socialists, they did appallingly. And I've been looking at Twitter, you know, Hamon got 6.2% of the vote. There were some on the left who were saying, between fascism and what drives us to fascism, no vote. That was their motto, many on the left. So some want to actually boycott the second round. Is that going to be wise, or is it just going to hand the election to Le Pen on a platter?
I don't think that Marine Le Pen has many chances to be elected. So I can understand why people, have, trouble to choose between the candidate, the racist candidate, and the candidate of the establishment, because Emmanuel Macron presents himself as breaking the system, but is a production of the system. He was a banker. He was with François Hollande during his campaign in 2012. He was his advisor, and then his minister of economy. So it's part of all the reason why French people are angry. So I can understand that people don't want to feed a candidate that is backed by the bankers and by the finance, and and a candidate that who, as a president, would dismantle all the social system that had made France famous. So I understand why people are hesitating, especially because we think now today maybe it's a mistake that Marine Le Pen doesn't have any chance to be elected. So that's the reason why they won't give Emmanuel Macron the feeling that he's supported by many people in the country.
David, did he maybe lose some supporters by the fact that he was so triumphant in the symbolism and the gestures last night? You know, his arms raised aloft. He had his wife on stage. It was as if he'd actually won the presidency. Those people who feel the zeitgeist, the anti-establishment zeitgeist, would they be put off by that?
Well, absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. I think the rather overindulgent celebrations were perhaps a bit too early on, really. If anything, I would say actually Macron's speech was probably the vaguest of all the candidate speeches. He didn't really suggest very much, except for the fact that he wanted to be the next president of France, which we already know. In many ways, I do think it was rather complacent, actually. And I think, as you say, if you are living in parts of France, particularly in the Nord-Pas-de-Calais, places which were formerly industrialised, you may well be rather disappointed to see somebody celebrating in such a fashion. Nevertheless, I do think, as we've said before, I do think Macron has enough in him and enough of this sense that he is someone who isn't necessarily a political person, even though we know he is somebody who is a politician. He is somebody who can appear to be an outsider, and I do think that will get him over the line on the 7th of May.
Rokhaya, you think Macron will win. How are you preparing for life under Macron? What do you think it will be like?
I think it will be a continuation of life under François Hollande. It would be maybe even worse because he's economically more liberal. So that means that, you know, everything that France has settled since the Second World War, meaning the social system, the healthcare, would be destroyed by what he stands for. And I just want to answer about the celebration that he had last night. I think it's very inappropriate because there is nothing to celebrate when you have a country where 7 million voters support a party that is openly racist and openly contesting the implication of France in the deportation of the French Jewish people during the Second World War. So I think that, you know, as a president, if he's elected, which is likely to happen, he really should be careful and not give the impression, the feeling that he's totally disconnected from the population and from the fact that we still have many people in France who are suffering from poverty, unemployment, and who really don't need to have the image of someone celebrating, you know, something that doesn't really how can I say that? Doesn't deserve to be celebrated.
Final question for you, David. Given that the stars seem to be aligned for Macron, it's too early to say, but that's the best available information so far. Are they breathing a sigh of relief in Brussels?
I suspect they probably are, yes. I think it's a very good news for the European Union to have Emmanuel Macron as the next president. I suspect he'll maintain the status quo as far as the EU and indeed France's role within it is concerned. However, what I would say is that he may be pushed to some extent by having potentially to deal with the centre-right after the elections for the National Assembly in June. It may well be the case that he has to form a government which is either both left and right or largely right-wing, and that might push him to kind of renegotiate some of the deals with Europe France currently has. But I think on the whole, a real sigh of relief in Brussels, absolutely.
Okay, not long to go. We'll anxiously await those results, and we'll have a special Newsmakers show after the second round of the elections. Rokhaya and David, thank you very much for joining us.